ton of scientists from Nazi Germany, brought them over to America, and even Werner von Braun. They had Werner von Braun run NASA. He was a Nazi, like 100% Nazi.
Good friends with Hitler type Nazi.
Yes, he was. He ran a Berlin rocket factory where they hung the 5 slowest Jews. They would hang them out front so everybody would know, like, this is what happens when you work slow. We'll hang you. I mean, the Simon Wiesenthal Center said that if Werner von Braun was alive today, they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity.
Yes, they would.
And that was the head of NASA. That was the head of NASA. That was the guy who got us to the moon. That was the big cheese guy. Yeah. So we were willing to put a lot of really dark things aside in order to gather up the best scientists so that the Soviet Union couldn't get them all. And they got a few of them as well. But we got how many? More than 1,000, right?
Allegedly 1,400, but I would not be surprised if, the story changes and there were more, right?
Yeah.
But that goes back to our discussion earlier about being in pole position. I mean, that's why we grabbed those Nazis. We were like, if we don't get them, the Russians will.
I get it. And, and I'm sure the Nazis could say, I didn't want to do it. They made me. I'm a nice person. I love Jews.
Well, that was part of the mythology. It was like, we got the good Germans. Well, no, we didn't.
Right.
We got the top Germans, and who do you think the top Germans were?
Yeah.
They were coveted by Hitler, Himmler, Göring,
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were right. I mean, there were guys that we grabbed out of the docks at Nuremberg literally to come be part of our program,
One of these guys, you're smart, you're an asset, right? I mean, that's what Genghis Khan used to do. He'd take warlords from the other side and capture them and go, listen, just come over here, bro. Come on. Work for me. I'm the man.
I mean, ideology aside, I'm super smart and I want that to be known. That's kind of that's the competitor, right?
Sure,
I mean, you cannot be the best rocket designer in the world and not want those talents, demonstrated. That's Werner von Braun's story. That's the story of all of them. And that was so shocking writing that book, because it's like, wow, huge amounts of talent, but how far will the competitor go to see their baby come to fruition? What are they willing to put aside? Yeah.
Did you pay any attention to the other places where Nazis went when they escaped Germany, like Argentina in particular? Have you ever seen any of that stuff? Where they have entire German towns down in Argentina.
Gosh, right.
They do Oktoberfest down there. They wear lederhosen. They drink out of steins. It's crazy. They speak German. And you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, my friend Tim Kennedy went down there, and he said he was literally talking to people, interviewing people, and they had photos of SS soldiers on their wall, and they would talk about how grandfather was a hero, and they're like, you're the descendants of escaped Nazis, and they put together a town down there.
I mean, the way the Nazis were able to flee is I can't read enough of that. I mean, that's what Jamie and I were talking about. It's like,
dark.
Oh my God. And it's endless. I mean, there's so, the ones that there was a famous guy that we got. He was the Surgeon General of the Third Reich. I mean, think about that, okay? Dr. Walter Schreiber. I mean, he was such a bad dude. He was in charge of the vaccine program. I mean, you just put those words together and your mind goes really dark, right? But we wanted him because he was an expert in vaccines. And we brought him to the United States. He was the only Nazi I found of the ones, the paperclip scientists who came here, that was actually outed, right? He was outed as a Nazi. And that's because one of the investigators at the Nuremberg trials recognized him.
Oh, Jesus.
And he's the only one we got out of here. And guess where he went?
Argentina.
And lived out the rest of his life there.
The show was called Finding Hitler. They were trying to find evidence that Hitler somehow escaped. It was really a bullshit premise to the show. But what was interesting is that there were thousands and thousands of Nazis that made it to Argentina and set up shop. It's throughout South America. There's a lot of Germans down there. It's kind of weird.
if you can imagine me on book tour of like the kind of questions I get, because we're talking, right? Having written books about Area 51, Nazis,
Jesus.
right? Assassins.
How are you still alive?
People, I mean, just last night I was at a book giving a signing, and people are like, "Is Hitler really dead?" You know?
Oh God!
I mean, that right?
What if he was alive? He'd be the oldest man alive,
right?
Can you imagine? He was probably like, how old was he during World War II? He had to be in his 40s,
Yeah,
right?
he'd be hundreds, you know. I mean, no, but right? Or they say he cloned himself.
He'd be
right?
160 years old.
He'd be 120 now.
Well, that's what he'd be?
1889.
Oh, Jesus.
Jamie knows.
That's an old man. I mean, there's been 120-year-old people, but it's fucking pretty rare. Yeah. So Operation Paperclip was not even publicly acknowledged until, what was it, like the 90s? Like when did it become public? I think it was through the Freedom of Information Act, was it?
It was this very intrepid journalist named Linda Hunt who...
Shout out to Linda.
Yeah. I mean, she broke the story. That's what's amazing. I mean, as a journalist, you're always writing on the shoulders of those before you, right? And she had it really hard because she did a Freedom of Information Act request, got all these documents that no one had ever seen. And then the government sent her a bill for $125,000. And she had to spend a lot of time. This is what I understand. I never interviewed her, but for Xeroxing fees.
What?
Yeah. I just love that detail because it's like, it's such a covert way of getting someone to stop. It's like, okay, here's the information we had to give it to you, but now here's your bill. Imagine if the government's coming down on you for $125,000.
Yeah, see,
You're
that would make
uncomfortable.
me want to call a bunch of rich people and go, hey, let's all just donate $1,000 to this lady.
And it's a different world now. You could do that. You could do a GoFundMe campaign.
100%.
But my God, in the 80s and the 90s, you were
Right.
just like out on a limb.
Yeah, they would crush you financially.
Right?
We actually had this very same discussion yesterday with my friend Phil Demers, who's being sued by Marineland. And because of he was a walrus trainer and trained orcas, and he's showing how
Blackfish?
horrific. It wasn't Blackfish,
Okay.
that's SeaWorld, but it's SeaWorld is actually, the way he says, it's a day in the park compared to Marineland. Marineland's a horrific place in Canada. And anyway, they have been trying to squash him with legal fees by dragging out his case. But we set up GoFundMes, and all his legal bills get paid for from people that want him to win the good fight. And this is an option today that wasn't available to Linda when she was exposing this. $125,000. You assholes! Like she should sue them for misappropriation of funds. Like, does it cost you really $125,000 to print those things out? If it does, you guys should be in jail. Like that's like with like those $10,000 hammers that they have in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she gets all this information, and does the government immediately acknowledge that they imported these Nazis?
No. I mean, she wrote the first book, and it was just stunning. And you know,
What year was this?
Late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, then more gets revealed because they gave her a certain amount. I mean, I filed a bunch of FOIAs. There was releases. I went to Germany.
FOIA meaning Freedom of
Information Act, yes. Then I went to Germany and looked in their archives with like a fellow, a German PhD who had, you know, real access to stuff and was able to translate for me while we were there looking at this stuff. I interviewed a lot of grandchildren of Nazis and children of Nazis. And, you know, I mean, this one extraordinary, oh my God, there's a guy, I told you about Schreiber, right? I'm on the narrative level, humans acting, I'm so interested in rivalry and competition, right? As a concept, because this is what America does to be the best, and also as humans, right? Because people are like that. They're built like that. So the Nazis had rivals amongst themselves, and Schreiber's rival was Dr. Blum, who was in charge of the biological weapons program for Hitler, okay? And Blum had a son, and Blum was prosecuted at Nuremberg. You can see a picture of him with a big dueling scar. You know, he was a bad dude. He had
a dueling scar?
Dueling scar.
Duel like a sword duel?
Sword fighting. It was like among the Nazis, they would duel with one another when they were younger students. And then they would pack the wound with horsehair to make it even more pronounced because it looked ferocious.
Really?
Pull up, Jamie, pull up
I got a couple. What's his name?
Well, you can pull up Dr. Blum, Bolme,
That's the same.
but also
Look at that big ass scar on his
right?
face.
And also if you pull up Kurt Debus, who was the director of our JFK Center. He was NASA's von Braun's number 2. He had a huge dueling scar, and yet there he is right there. Knowing what we know now, it's like, come on, you're trying to tell me that guy's not a hardcore Nazi?
So those guys had dueling scars on their faces.
Yeah, you see him?
How often did they duel?
Well, when they were
Did
in
they do
college,
it to the death?
No. It was like on guard, and then they would
fencing.
Fencing.
Oh, this guy had it too.
Yep.
How did they not get poked in the eyes?
Oh, I guess that was the gentleman's rules.
How do you listen? You go in for the cheek, you hit the eye. Like that's happens all the time. I mean, they must have cut a lot of eyeballs out.
I haven't seen any photographs of missing eyeballs, but there's a lot right on the cheek. So maybe that was the whole point. It was actually just a bit for show.
Oh,
right.
How weird.
But it was
a badge of honor.
It was a badge of honor. Yeah.
There's more.
But
wow. So they all had it on their face.
Yeah.
It's all in the same spot. Dueling scars.
Yeah.
Wow.
So imagine,
so they wanted to have these scars.
That was
Jesus Christ. Oh, they had goggles on.
Oh, there you go. That's how they didn't take out the
academic
eyeballs.
fencing, it says. Academic fencing. So what they were essentially doing, they were having fencing matches with real swords, not with ones with tips.
Okay.
Wow. And cutting their faces up. Fuck, man. Oh, Jesus, look at this guy's face. Yikes. Wow. Dueling cults. That is crazy.
So when you consider that people did not know about that, and then you've got these Germans walking around America as part of our space program and our science programs, and these are the good Germans. I mean, now you really have to say to yourself, come on, guys.
They were all Nazis.
Right?
Big ass fucking scars on their face.
Absolutely.
Wow. Oof. That's dark,
like
man.
OG Fight Club.
Yeah, right. OG.
Don't talk about Fight Club.
Super OG. Yeah. God, it's crazy. Wow.